So for as long as I can remember, people have complained about how challenging it is to hear in this sanctuary. I'm honest that instead of hearing the clarity of the speaker's voice, they hear instead muffled sounds, echoes. This space may be beautiful to the eye, but to the ear, not so much. As you might remember from science class, when sound is made, it creates a wave that travels out more or less directly. So to best hear a sound, one needs to be in the direct path of its wave. An echo, on the other hand, is the result of the sound reflecting off of something, say a hard wall or a space that's empty at the back. When this occurs, the sound still returns to the listener, but differently, usually in a diminished or distorted form. This is exactly what we have struggled with in this sanctuary for the past 50 or so years. As you have hopefully noticed, we have upgraded our sound system. We hope you'll be patient with us as we adjust to it. This is the first time we are trying it on, literally this night. Timing, it's a strange thing. During this process, one of the sound engineers joked with me, once we've got it working right, the sound should be better in this space than it ever has been before. So I guess now you'll find out if they really like what you have to say, or if they prefer to return to how it used to be. You'll tell me, I guess we'll see. When you think about it, being able to hear clearly or listen carefully not only proves important when it comes to processing information, but more critically, it sits at the very heart of human connection. Think for yourself about how gratifying it is to feel heard on the one hand, and how disappointing it can be to feel unacknowledged on the other. And as such, on this Erev Rosh Hashanah, I'd like to invite us to listen openly and tune into the realities of what we hear and what we don't, the calls we pick up on and the calls we miss, whether or not we are truly attentive to our family, our friends, and our community. A few years ago, one of my favorite authors, the renowned novelist Jonathan Safran Foer, wrote a beautiful article exploring this very topic. It opened with the following. He says, "A couple of weeks ago, I saw a stranger crying in public. A girl, maybe 15 years old, was on a bench opposite me, crying into her phone. I heard her say, 'I know, I know, I know,' over and over. 'Mama, I know.' And the tears came harder. 'Mama, I know,' she said, and hung up, placing the phone on her lap. I was faced with a choice. I could interject myself into her life, or I could respect the boundaries between us. There was a lot of human computing to be done." Think for a moment about what you would do if you were sitting in Safran Foer's shoes. Would you try to step in to offer a caring ear? Or would you remain tuned out in the hum and buzz of the periphery? If we're like most people, it's likely the latter. In fact, modern psychology tells us that when it comes to personal, emotional investment, we've conditioned ourselves to prefer the proverbial echo over the heart's calling. Perhaps some of us have called someone on the phone when we knew the other person wouldn't be available to answer, or sent a text to avoid making a call at all. As Safran Foer puts it, it's easier to make a phone call than to schlep to see someone in person. Shooting off an email is easier still because one can hide behind the absence of vocal inflection. Each step forward has made it easier to avoid the emotional work of being present, to convey information rather than humanity. We prefer the emotional distance of a quick fix response to the vulnerability of physically sitting with a friend as they share their pain. We prefer the dinner table with the TV on, or our fork in one hand and phone in the other, to the more challenging give and take of real conversation, no less awkward silence. We prefer the echo chamber of the continual feedback loop of like opinions to the countenancing of opposing views. These little invisible bubbles we create, they are safe, they are efficient, and they are effective. Or so we tell ourselves. But they come with one notably significant side effect: isolation and loneliness. As human beings, we not only crave real connection, we actually need it in order to live. This is something our Torah was very familiar with. The Torah itself uses the words lo tov, not good, twice, only twice in the entirety of the Torah. Do you know when they happen? First, as an admonition against personal isolation in regards to Adam, and second, as an admonition against professional isolation in regards to Moses. That's it, twice. And both then and now, we need real relationships with people who care about us and about whom we care in order to give our lives purpose and meaning. But sadly, despite all the modern world's promise of connectivity, people today feel more alone than ever. And make no mistake, this is a reality right here in this community, this synagogue, this sanctuary. Over the years, my clergy partners and I have sat with countless people of all ages, genders, family structures, zip codes, addressing struggles with the profound challenges in their lives. These range from physical illness, mental illness, to family dysfunction and estrangement, from behavioral problems and addiction to economic struggle. They speak words that will reverberate with many of us. I wake up to no one. I don't leave my house. I could die and no one would even notice. It's just so much pressure. I can't keep up with the demand in the community. I don't know how we're gonna make it. My friends just drop me out of nowhere, and whenever I see them, I pretend to be on my cell. I don't feel so lonely that way. I haven't talked to my son in years. I don't understand why he won't call me back. I'm so worried about her. I don't know how to help her. She's destroying herself, but I'm afraid she's going to take us down with her. I don't see what I should live for. There's a million people all around me, but I know I'm all alone. Perhaps one of these is your voice. But let me assure you, at least one of these is the voice of someone you know, someone you love. And I want you to know something about these conversations. In nearly every one of them, the speakers express the fear that sharing what is really going on will lead to others pitying them at best or outright rejecting them at worst. And sadly, the ubiquitous nature of these struggles often remains locked in an almost inaudible whisper rather than the loud cry it should be. More often than not, the false perception of perfection here adds a pernicious layer of isolation and shame onto what is already a difficult situation, and this produces an awful cycle of suffering alone. So what then can we do to better hear the calls of those around us? Rosh Hashanah actually provides an answer for us. Enter the poignant blasts of the shofar. Do you know what the actual commandment is about the shofar? It's not to blow the shofar, which is what most people think it is, but instead it is to lishmoa, to hear the call of the shofar. Hearing the shofar blast is designed, as I said before, to wake us up, like an alarm clock for the soul to the truth of our lives, in particular in relationship with each other. This is also why the shofar blasts are not supposed to sound so pretty. They are intended to be raw and jarring, to message that something is in fact not quite all right, and that something is us. Consider this, though. There is a fascinating ancient teaching that crystallizes whether or not we have fulfilled the mitzvah of hearing the shofar. It teaches that if the shofar is sounded from deep in a pit, if one hears the sound of the shofar, one fulfills the mitzvah. But if one only hears the sound of the echo, one does not fulfill the mitzvah. Why would it be that hearing the echo isn't the same as actually hearing the sound? The teaching continues. If the listener is in the pit when the shofar is sounded, then surely the listener hears the sound itself. But if the listener is standing only on the edge of the pit, the listener has only heard the echo, and they have not fulfilled their obligation. Unlike the technical definition of hearing, just perceiving some sort of sound in our ear, from a Jewish framework, hearing means really understanding, taking the call in its truest sense. And that is impossible to do if we can't access the pure sound. If the echo is the only thing we can perceive, we are not really hearing, and that is missing the mark. So despite our deep yearnings for connection, why do we prefer to stand on the periphery instead of diving deep down inside? For one thing, it's cleaner up there on the surface. The perimeter is all shine, no smudge. You don't have to figure out an entrance or an exit strategy because there's little to no confrontation in the echo. It is, by its nature, less intense. Down in the pit, it's dirty. There's no way to get down there without it leaving its mark on us. Really sitting with someone in their pain means that we will have to consider that their pain might very well happen to us or to someone in our family. Really listening hard to another's point of view, our own deeply held views may be challenged. And for most people, both outcomes sound pretty scary. Yet here's the thing. Ironically, these so-called threats are the very same factors that differentiate our human capacities from every other species on this planet. We, humans, are the only species who can nurture relationships from a place of vulnerability, and in doing so, forge bonds of profound care and love. We are the only species whose evolution is based not just on our physical survival, but also on our ability to transform and grow soulfully over the course of our lives. And at the core of all of this is our deep human need for each other, to know and to be known, to hear and to be heard. Foyer again. Most of the time, most people are not crying in public, but everyone is always in need of something that another person can give, be it undivided attention or deep empathy. There is no better use of a life than to be attentive to such needs. There are as many ways to do this as there are kinds of loneliness, but all of them require the human processing of the only animal who risks getting it wrong and whose dreams provide shelters and vaccines and words to crying strangers. So what does this all mean for us? As a sacred community, we have to be willing to open our hearts, our minds, and our ears to really hear the calls, even the whispers, as they are being offered to us. Perhaps this is one of the reasons for the High Holy Day liturgical refrain that it is only when the great shofar is sounded that the still small voice can be heard. Consider this heart-piercing Talmudic story about what it means to discern the echo from the call. Elazar has been lying on his bed in a dark room for days in silence. Concerned, his teacher and friend Yochanan comes to visit. Known for his positivity and illuminating outlook on life, Yochanan literally fills up the entire room with his light when he walks in. But Elazar stays balled up in the corner, weeping. Uneasy with Elazar's pain, Yochanan immediately begins to offer quick, somewhat trite fixes to try to make his friend feel better. Don't worry, if you're upset because you didn't study as much Torah as you would have liked, all you have to do is direct your heart to God and you'll feel better. Or maybe you're upset because of your economic condition. Don't worry, we can study Torah together, we'll pray, and everything will turn around. Yochanan, swept up in the echo of what he assumes must be the problem, continues offering solution after solution until Elazar stops him and calls out the deepest and darkest truth of his soul, the source of his pain. I am crying over the fact that life is fleeting and everyone we love will die. Yochanan's heart is pierced by Elazar's outcry. Truly hearing him now, Yochanan allows Elazar's pain to sink into his own heart. Tears come down his own eyes. No longer attempting to solve Elazar's problems, he now responds not with his head, but with his heart. I hear you, he says. This is indeed a good reason to cry. When their crying softens, Yochanan quietly asks Elazar, does the silence of this space bring you comfort? Rabbi Elazar laments, no, but nothing really does. Upon hearing this, Yochanan extends a hand to Eleazar, and despite it all, Eleazar places his hand inside Yochanan's, and Yochanan pulls him up, standing once again. Our goal is not to silence the cries of the pain or struggle of another, but rather to make sure that when they are shared, that their calls do not fall on deaf ears. No matter the challenge or struggle, our job is to assure that no one has to suffer alone. Hearing them, truly hearing them, we can offer so much more than words. We can hold their hearts in our hearts. We can hold their hands in our hands. We can make ourselves a vessel for their souls. Renowned French philosopher Simone Weil wrote the following: "Attention is the rarest and purest form of generosity. Attention, taken to its highest degree, is the very same thing as prayer. It presupposes faith and love. Absolutely unmixed attention is prayer itself." Our Judaism has never given itself or us over to the blurred, echoing whims of the day. It beckons us to move beyond the periphery, to open our most attentive, listening hearts so that they might sense the calls of isolation, fear, and despair that our ears often miss. The echo may offer us information, but it is the call that channels the soul. Receiving grief and joy from the deepest recesses of each other's hearts, sharing in and learning from a diversity of ideas, these are the fulfillment of our higher calling as partners with God in completing the works of creation we celebrate on Rosh Hashanah. Make no mistake, hearing each other is so much bigger than the conversation. In really listening to each other, we repair our world. In a new year of open ears and open hearts for us all, Shana Tova.